Okay, we're in the projects for Math 121, Project B. Now, granted, you may not be at the level yet, but I want to point out, when I asked my TI 89, to me that's a dinosaur calculator, but at one time this was the cutting edge technology for handheld computation. It really was. And it still remains to be so. It's a great calculator, but there's many great calculators out there. But I got to be honest with you, for the most part, I think people really aren't using these calculators much anymore. They've got computers, including their cell phones, that can run products like Sage on your cell phone. But anyway, you can certainly type this in using a TI-89 calculator and it gets an answer, it gets an approximate answer. What I want to do, I want to use Sage to do the problem. All right. Now, again, you may not be at the stage where you can do it, but I'm going to claim that they're asking me to do a couple different things. Now, this comes later on in Math 121, where you're doing a numerical approximation to an integral. But I want to point out that Sage is really good at doing, things that are difficult. And so is the TI-89, by the way. TI-89 can do this no problem at all. Right? It can also do summations. And it does a fantastic job, by the way. It really does. All right. Now, again, the expectation is you're reading through this stuff over here and you're trying to make sense out of it. And I really mean that. Your education isn't just simply to get something done, it's to understand. It's like reading a book. I mean, you could read a book, but, not understand a word you're reading. That's not an education, by the way. There's tons of times where I'm reading something and my brain is drifting off somewhere else. And then I say, I don't remember anything I just read. What do I have to do? Go back and read it again, right? Go back and read it again. So my answer is not just typing things up, but it's actually reading stuff, all right? But I'm gonna go through it, and remember what I do. I got to launch Sage. So Sage, we talked about in the first project how to launch it. Now, since I just launched it recently, it's in my dock. I'm going to click Sage Math, and what I'm going to do. Last time I did the Jupyter Notebook. This time I'm going to do command line. I'm going to launch command line, and it's going to open up my terminal application and start running Sage. All right. So I got Sage running now. At this point in time, I'm running Sage 9.4, but that's certainly what changed when Sage gets updated. And I'm running a version of Python 3.9.5. So let me reset. And I'm going to define x to be a variable. Again, I want to emphasize in Sage, x is a variable, but it's a good habit to get into defining your variables before using them. And then, I want to copy paste. Yeah, I'm kind of lazy, right? No, not really. I typed the whole document up. So what is this thing over here? Let me just do that. And I'm gonna type in f of x. I'm gonna display it for you. You know what it did? It did some computations over there. So I wonder what computation it did. Well, I want to point out it 1 divided by 5 divided by square root of 2 divided by pi, and then e to this number over here. And it did a lot of computations, by the way. Someone says, why didn't it do this computation over here? Well, it could have, but it didn't. Why didn't it expand it? It could have, but it didn't. But it certainly did this numerical approximation over here. I want to point out the number one reason it did that was I'm using decimal numbers over here. That's the number one reason I'm doing it. All right? But right, let's look back over the notes, and I want to point out what I'm doing over here. I'm actually typing in this function over here, which is 1 divided by 5 divided by the square root of 2 pi e raised to the power minus x minus 7 squared over 50. Now again, you might have to study this line of code here to see the relationship between the two, right? You might have to do that. You might have to do it, all right? But I'm going to keep going, and I want to do this thing up here, which is numerical integral. And again, I'm just learning, all right? Numerical integral. So I'm going to type that in, copy paste, of course. And what is it doing? It's integrating f of x on the interval from 2 to 12. Let me go back over my notes and show you where this is. It's this integration over here. Now, what am I expecting to get? When I integrate this thing here, I'm expecting to get this number over here. Well, let's see what happens. By the way, maximum points 100. It's doing 100 sample points, I guess. Well, I get something over here. And what am I getting? I'm getting this number over here. I'm getting it. I'm getting the same thing that TI-89 got. It's getting more digits, by the way. Now, someone says, I wonder what this thing is over here. And you may not know what it is. So what I want to claim over here, let's say you don't know what the output is going to be. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in numerical, N-U-M. I got a lot of different choices over there. And what am I doing over here? I'm looking for the one I want. And let's take a look. Numerical. And return again. And I guess I want numerical integral, right? And then I got the question mark. I use my cursor key to get there, by the way. And then you could read about this if you like. You're learning. You want to learn. And what does it give you? You know, certainly gives me probably more information I want to know at this point. But I'm going to briefly talk through it for you. Yeah, it's a lot of information. If you want to move forward in the help page, you hit the space bar. And yeah, I get another page of help. All right, I get another page of help. And you could read through that. I'm not saying you can't read through that. And you know, certainly reading it, I would say is probably going to be pretty tough for a lot of students. That's where your education is, though, in reading. All right, it really is. All right, it's your education. All right, you can read through that. But anyway, right now I'm feeling pretty comfortable that if you want, you can read through that. Now I'm going to quit. Came to the end. I'm going to put the Q key and quit. I'm also going to clear the screen, by the way. All right, I'm going to clear it out. By the way, that did not get rid of anything except for my screen. I want to go back to my code. And what I want to do over here is I want to type the next thing in, which is this line of code right over here. And I'm going to go back over the notes and show you what I'm looking at in my notes. All right, before I do that, I want to claim what I'm looking at. I think I'm looking at this thing over here, which is 1/100th times the sum of f evaluated at 2 plus I over 100 for I that goes from 0 to 999. Well, you know what? Maybe it's not this one over here, because I notice if I'm going 0 to 99, they're not doing that. They're going from 0 to 99 over here. So I'm going to hit the return button. Now I can show what happens. And I get a number. And what number I'm getting the same number they got over here. Now someone says, what's this doing? This is doing a Riemann sum. All right. Again, read the notes. If you're not at that stage in Math 121, you'll eventually get there where you're doing Riemann sums. All right. So I got this over here. Now again, I'm going to claim that, you know, looking at this thing over here, I probably could do this one now by having this code here. So let me clear the screen. And, you know, if you can remember it, fine. I want to press the up arrow, though, and I'll show you what happens when you press the up arrow. You get the commands that you just typed through. And I want to change the numbers. So I'm going to use my arrow now to get over here. And I'm going to change that 0 to a 1. And I'm going to change a 999 to 1,000. And now I'm going to hit return. You notice I'm not hitting shift return. I'm just going to do return. And what do I get? I get this number over here. All right. So here I'm learning something. One is I'm learning how to do a numerical integral, and I'm learning how to do a summation. And that's important. And by the way, that goes over here as well. That covers it for the most part, and we'll get to Project C later. Here's the deal, though. If your objective is to come here and retype this thing in over here, you really have no understanding what you're asking to do. Now, granted, that's like the most basic thing you can do is just retype what someone gave you. It's almost like rewriting a language you understand, which reminds me historically, people that did that were called scribes. They really couldn't, you know, read, but they sure could write. But they couldn't understand what they were writing. And what they did was they took manuscripts, and they were very good at copying, but they had no understanding what they were copying. All they did was copied verbatim what they saw, but they could not understand what they were copying. All right? That's almost like you're given a document in a foreign language and someone says retype it. You're not going to learn a language by retyping it. Not unless you're incredibly intelligent. You need to spend a considerable amount of time studying Math 121 before you get to the coding section. Now, why do we put the code down here? We're trying to get you guys familiar with coding. But the point of coding is being able to take your brain and put it into a computer to have the computer do the heavy lifting. But if you do not understand what you're seeing, you'll never get to that stage of being able to enter into a computer. Again, we're trying to get you guys to read and understand what you've read. Thank you so much.